What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Medicin podcast. My name is Mimi, and I have my love, my king here with me.
What is going on? You kind of stole my usual intro of what is going on,
What is going
but
on?
it's all good. What is going on, everybody? We are so freaking stoked to be here today with one of our good friends, but somebody we've looked up to in the space for so long, such an inspiration for things that we do. Welcome to the Medicin, Mark Groves.
What is going on? I feel like I need to have that one too.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, we are super stoked to talk to you. You have been on our list of bucket list guests for a long time because you're just one of the realest. And
Yeah.
I know I've told you this, but it's so refreshing and I would say rare to come across a teacher with plenty of expertise and wisdom to impart on people, but also is like in the stuff with you. It seems like you are maybe a few steps ahead of us, but right alongside us, where you're in it and you are doing the work yourself, and you just show up in a very real and authentic way to your listeners and people who follow you and trust you for advice. And I appreciate that so much about you, and it is radiant and inviting and engaging and all the wonderful things.
Well, thanks so much. I mean, I think that's what people seek, is to be witnessed in another, to be validated in their suffering, their human experience. It's interesting because pain itself, in a lot of ways, is so narcissistic in that it makes us think it's only us, or no one else would understand, or no one else has been through this thing. And while the very details of circumstances might be unique to us, the human experience of suffering relationally or just in general is pretty common,
Mm-hmm.
And if we can begin to accept that, then, pain tends to make us want to isolate. Well, if we start to see it within other people, we start to go back to community. We start to be welcomed back and go to other people in groups to heal, which is, it takes a village is a saying for a reason, because it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. I'm excited. We're so excited to talk to you and dive into all of your wisdom and everything as it relates to relationships and consciousness. But the first question that we ask every guest on the Medicin is, what do you love in your life? What aspect of your life do you love so much that you wish you could gift it to every human?
What a great question. I think it would be the simplicity of nature. I get so much from hiking and mountain biking and walking through a forest, touching a leaf. Like, all of it is, there's so much amazingness, obviously, on the screen of an iPhone. You're so captivated by all the colors, and I mean, let's be honest, the behavioral psychologists and the designers, their whole purpose is to keep you there.
Yeah.
But when you actually, and of course, that makes so much sense. But when you begin to put the same attunement to nature and to a leaf, you can find so much in it. And you realize that is actually much more nourishing for your body and your soul. It's so easy to be brought away by the fleeting nature of technology. And obviously it serves so many beautiful purposes, but I think it makes us forget that connection to nature. And whenever I feel lost, like, that's where home is found. That's where I can find myself again.
I love that.
So perfect. It's actually one of the things that I recommend to men often around, like, how can I find my inner masculinity, or how can I listen to my intuitive masculine? And I often say, like, get out into nature, something that is like almost overwhelmingly feminine, and this mother nature thing, and sit in that essence and listen to your masculinity find balance. I think it's John Wineland who says something along the lines of, like, masculinity is the ability to stand amongst the flow of life and be steadfast and strong, and something like that. I'm completely butchering it, but finding those spaces where there is just a massive feminine energy is actually really strengthening for masculinity, I've found, and being able to not dominate or conquer nature, but rather sit in it and actually be able to hold it and let it flow through you is a really strong like masculine practice. And so that is so spot on and perfect.
Yeah, it reminds me just when you're saying you are able to find yourself again. I can't remember who told me this. I think it was Zach Bush actually, who said that the actual definition of nature in the dictionary is they frame it in a way where it basically is explaining it in a way that is separate from man, like everything outside of man. And he was like, this is so backwards. We are nature. We are part of nature. Just because we've constructed these things that we call houses, we think that we are not part of nature. But it makes sense, you know, to your point, that when we immerse ourselves in more of that which is us, we are able to then find parts of us that maybe we've, you know, separated from. So I love that. And we are just absolutely aligned. It's one of the reasons why so many cultures actually prescribe something like forest bathing as an actual medicine for people to get rebalanced.
Who knew we'd have to prescribe
I know, right?
to your natural state, you know?
It's like equal parts beautiful and sad at the same time.
Yeah, because you think of like, that's exactly what heals us with food. That's exactly what it's always about. Digitizing yourself, dematerializing yourself, you know, which ironically is also the dematerialization, or I'm not even sure if that's a word, of your beliefs, of the constructs of how you think you should relate, your traumas, you know, all of it is about remembering and returning to the circadian rhythm of the world. You know, this idea that we're smarter than the universe or smarter than the planet, or it's such a load. It's so arrogant.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we can just rationalize our way through life and understanding and purpose when it like so desperately needs to be felt.
It like actually makes me laugh out loud when I think, you know, of someone or hearing like, yeah, we've got it figured out. Like we know how this works. Like it reminds me of Terrence McKenna, who he's like, nobody knows what's going on. The best guesses are lies. Nobody has a clue about anything. We just try and we make up things as we go. But yeah, it's just a joke. But anyways, I'm before we jump into all things conscious relationships and all of that, your wonderful story that's so akin and likened to ours, which we'll jump into. But curious, if in case any of our listeners have not heard about you or listened to your podcast, could you give us just a quick synopsis on what it is that you do in the world on a daily basis and how you really show up, and what is your gift to the world right now? What are you doing to help people on a daily basis?
Well, I am simply obsessed with human relating, human connecting, human psychology. I know that how we relate will have the greatest impact on our health, our lives, the quality of both of those things. And so for me, it's really why do we do what we do? Because we often do very ridiculous things. And love is the thing that we crave the most. You know, I think it might be the thing that will make us stop doing the bullshit that we do. And it might be the thing that's just most important or important enough to us that we will stop and question and will pay attention. And really any invitation to, let's just call it something like awakening, is really just beginning to ask questions. Why do I do what I do? Is there more to this? And that was birthed by a breakup for me originally. And that continues to be deepened by breakups and deepened by relationship, because I think relationship as a container, especially romantic relationship, but mom and dad serve a pretty good purpose too. And children, I don't have kids, but I would imagine that too. They are all just such a magnifying glass to the work that we need to do in the areas that we need to free ourselves from patterns and behaviors that limit us and impact us and in some way have a heavy psychic toll upon us that we don't even realize.
Yeah. Oh, perfectly put. I definitely want to get more and more into, you know, your story and relationships, but, you know, getting to know you a little bit, just some fun questions to get things going. You know, what would you say are some of your core values as a human being?
Mental, relational, emotional health, and physical health. Those are definitely, and I don't think you can really have one without the other of any of those. So they're all correlated. Yeah, correlated. Clearly, I'm an excellent orator. And humor, levity, like finding joy in this, that I think we need to laugh as we crack. I think that might be the thing that humanizes us the most, or at least makes this tolerable,
Totally.
Integrity, like just being committed to what is true for me, what is in alignment for me, and really integrity being sort of the cornerstone of all of it, which is being in integrity with my values and in integrity with my potential. That's another one that I really realized over time, that when you're sitting on untapped knowledge, when you're sitting on unintegrated, really the pains of our life are teaching us how to grow. And if we don't look at them and cultivate from them, we don't become what they're asking of us. And then we don't heal the pain. We don't give it purpose. And so that has become a sort of cornerstone value of mine, is living at the highest level of knowledge that has been presented to me thus far.
I love that. I love the emphasis on humor. What's wild is like when you go through a therapeutic cry, oftentimes and not like a depressed cry where you're crying nonstop for days on end, but a therapeutic cry on the other side of that oftentimes is like laughter. Laughter, that's the doorway to that sense of the burden's been lifted and what the hell am I so worried about? And so I definitely love that piece. And we can't survive unless we can crack a fart joke or a schmegma joke,
Schmegma joke.
Yeah.
Mimi, you really brought the house down
right
before we hit record.
And so if we can't have those little slivers of just taking this life experience for just the layer of humor that it really is,
it's play.
It's play.
I think we have an epidemic of people who are pretending to be adults only. And that really kind of breeds this dis-ease in a lot of people. And, I don't think it's a coincidence that at the time that I was sickest emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally, was also the time when I could laugh at myself the least.
Yeah.
When I took it as a dagger or a personal insult or I don't want that person to think this about me. It's like our ability to not only just, not laugh at other people's expense, but also just ourselves, like where it's just like, yeah, what am I doing? That's crazy. Like it really is liberating. And talk about it in relationship. I mean, there's a reason why girls will date the dude guy and it's like, he could be a 10. If he can't make me laugh, like, sorry, bye. Like there's a reason. It's because it like opens up this different compartment or cavern in your heart that is, I feel like the key only fits when there's laughter involved.
So important for repair. I used to use humor as a way of protecting myself from closeness, sarcasm, cynicism. I was the class clown a lot of the time. So it becomes your like survival strategy in order to have belonging. And when you learn how to heal whatever you're trying to protect yourself from. And I think this is true of all coping strategies. They can all become superpowers when they're harnessed because they're overdeveloped. They're overdeveloped, much like empathy or anxious attachment or any of that. They're all just super high attunement to someone else's behavior even on a very unconscious level. When we can harness that, we are attuned to people's energy, but we're not trying to fix it. We're not trying to heal it. We're just observing it and then responding from it rather than reacting.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's like, the self-deprecating, cynicism, the laughs that come from that space are funny. Like, yeah, they're funny and they can actually, create bonds with people. But the next time you have to resurface that joke or that type of joke, you need to almost like double it in order to get the same level of response. It's like junk food, right? You like the first time it tastes amazing, but the second time you need to eat it twice in order to be fulfilled by it, and so on and so forth. But if you create humor and laughter from a place of like love and abundance, like there is no ceiling. It actually creates energy. And I think that's like such a good point to remember, is that like humor in the right lane is something that is everlasting, versus humor from self-deprecation or cynicism it's like junk food. It's like dopamine that requires more and further exaggerations to be even met with some level of reply. So yeah, I love that. Changing a little bit, like, we love the question of who is God? What are we here for? What is the purpose of life? What for you? What are your views on God? What are your views on the divine? Do you subscribe to any sort of specific religion or epistemology?
Well, I would consider myself a recovering Catholic, so I am not an active member of that church. I grew up going to Catholic school. My mom is from Dublin, so that tells you we were like Catholics on steroids. And a lot of the harm that I saw from the church was actually maybe one of the first conscious moments that I asked, is this real? Is this the way it should be? Why are we afraid to ask questions? Why is part of faith not being curious? That was the way that we treated people who got divorced or who had sex before marriage. All of those were red flags to me. I remember in high school seeing this couple have to give a presentation to us in religion class, telling us about how they had sex before they got married and then they got pregnant, and none of us should do that and become like them. And I remember sitting in class just thinking how awful that was, that like I felt bad for them, that this was sort of their tour of shame. And, that felt really off for me, not to mention all the stories about the Catholic Church. So we don't even have to get into all that. But with all that said, I am not a Catholic, and I had a real aversion to the word God for a long time.
Yeah.
Because of that, my association, much like people have aversions to the word marriage when what they know of marriage is not health. It's not a healthy relationship. And instead of redefining the word, they avoid the experience, not realizing that they can create a different experience. And the same thing is true for me with religion, in that I started to really feel drawn to words like the universe or connected to one another, oneness. Buddhism really spoke to me, all of the physics in some way, quantum physics, because I had a linear mind too, that really gave some sort of organization, or trying to pinpoint what is unpinpointable. I'm making up a lot of terms today.
I love it.
You're on fire. Keep it up.
Yeah. And I had to heal my relationship with the word God, to be able to use it without sort of cringing or having some sort of pain associated with it. So I don't subscribe to a specific belief system, but I do subscribe to that no one has a fucking clue what's happening. And yes. I always think of Ram Dass's quote that miracles are just a way of reminding us that we don't know how it works.
I love that.
I'm constantly touched by that, by just the amazingness when you're in flow, when you're being mindful of your mindset, when you're waking up every day just imagining the impossible. Like, there is something beautiful about that. And just the serendipities of life. Like, you're thinking of someone, they text you. I ran into someone I knew in Sedona, like from Canada. I was in Vegas, and a guy I hadn't seen in 20 years from Calgary was the regional manager for the restaurant I was at. And I'm like, you remind me so much of this guy from Calgary. He's like, I am that guy from Calgary. And I'm like, oh, fuck.
Legit. Yeah.
Like, crazy to me. Like, what are the chances that both our lives brought us to that? Like, I'm just constantly amazed at how life is always trying to invite you to be better. How it's always trying to invite you to pay a little more attention. And also, so I think God or that experience relationally is also found in the depths of someone else. And I remember a practice, I forget what book it was from, but it invited you to spend the day looking at everyone as if you were looking through the eyes of Christ. And And I was on a plane actually that day. And it's hard to look at people through the eyes of Christ when you're on a plane, especially when you get up to get off the plane and the people from like 4 rows behind come up right beside you. And you're like, this isn't how order works.
Yeah. Have you ever been on a plane before?
Yeah. Like everyone hates you, just so we're clear. And you're not going to get ahead. No one else is letting you ahead. But through that day, I remember looking at everyone through the eyes of Christ. And it was so beautiful because I just saw like all the judgments I had or all the assumptions I was making. They were all not taking into context their experience. Even the person who rushes to get off, I could then contextualize why they were rushing or what they'd been through or what they're stressed about. There's a line from Ram Dass where he's talking about his teacher Maharaji, where Maharaji says, why do you do so much LSD? And he says, because when I do, I get to sit down with Christ and visit him. And Maharaji says, well, maybe instead of visiting him, why don't you just become him? And I've always loved that.
Yeah, I really love that. Not all of us are blessed with like profound divine intervention from a deity or an entity that spells out exactly what the meaning of life is. And
you haven't had that.
I haven't had that.
Wow. That's too bad.
This is how we find out.
But I do think the universe, God, whatever, flirts with us all the time. And it's a matter of just tuning into those little nudges and those little flirts. And whether or not you feel like you're rational and articulate enough to spell it out and put meaning towards it, or whether you just experience it and let it just show up in your life, I think it's still meaningful and should be paid attention to. So I definitely love that.
I just going off of everything that you said, I mean, it's we are so aligned where it's just like, I don't really know, but I'm really cool with that. Like, I like the curiosity. I like the unknown. I like the everlasting questions. And something that I think about all the time now, being away from the evangelical Christian church, is not worrying so much about like, I got to pray, or I didn't pray before this, or I need to like talk to Jesus, or I need to do this, or all of these needs and shoulds, right? These shoulds that I keep shoulding on myself. Instead of like feeling like I need to interact with God, I find myself being more drawn to get lost in things that are beautiful to me. Like where do I get lost in beauty? Like even just the way that we started the podcast, where you're talking about nature, where you can pick up a leaf and just look at the complexity and the intricacies, or just shoving your face in a rose and just like taking it deep into your lungs, or listening to the ocean waves, or whatever it is, however you interact with beauty. The feeling that I get from those interactions is what I imagine people are searching for when they're trying to interact with God. So I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's the same or if it's different, but that feels really good to me. And that feels more like God, like interacting with God, than any time I've prayed in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. There's something about touching or tasting or experiencing, what the word I would use for that is grace.
Mm-hmm.
You're sort of captured in the awe of, as much like the science of flourishing, or the science of awe, that you're just captured in this moment. In the definition of those spaces of flourishing, or in the spaces of what is the right term I'm not thinking of right now, flow state.
Yeah,
that the idea is that you're at one with the music, that like an hour goes by and it feels like 5 minutes. And if I didn't believe in God or something greater, I definitely did when I experienced extreme heartbreak, because all of a sudden I was touched by how could you love something so much? How could you love, and just like you feel. That's why I'm always so fascinated by heartbreak, because the idea is in the language is that your heart is broken, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Like the pain itself is evident of actually loving.
Yeah.
And And so the very thing that makes us not believe in love is actually the very thing that is the evidence of its existence. And then instead of, because our culture, we were talking about it, people faking adulting, which is very true. Our culture is such an adolescent culture that even in the experience of observing or being in heartbreak or being around someone who is we have collectively tried to avoid it rather than to learn from it. And look at that. When someone's relationship ends, we exile them. A lot of religions do that. A lot of cultures do that. And I would say that's because of the overlap of both of those things, that they're often synonymous. And so because we're so afraid of touching that ourselves, even as a collective, death, again, it's a death, and death in general, we try to exile people who have touched those spaces, who really, you think of like the hero's journey. Those are people who have gone out on the adventure, gathered the experience, but because they didn't come back in a relationship, we're like, nah, like you actually see ya, like you're not done. Go get married again, because then that'll validate, or go get back together, or stay with that person.
Yeah.
As opposed to teach us.
Yeah.
Like sit down with us, teach us, what could we have done better? I mean, I really think a broken heart is one that doesn't open again. It's one that is closed, as opposed to your heart actually works really good. Your boundaries suck, actually. You're not in alignment with your values. Like that's like, love doesn't hurt you. Relational challenges do, human dysfunction does, trauma does, reactivity does. And Eric Fromm in The Art of Loving talks about how there's nothing that we fail at more than love, yet we don't take the time to learn about.
That's such a good and really insightful way to look at and to consider all things included around heartbreak. Because I think, that it's a phenomenon that happens a lot, where you think that you're going to be with this person, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. And you, or maybe the people around you, see it as a failure rather than something to learn from, and to go into your next relationship, if you choose that, with more insight, more knowledge, and hopefully more tools that you've picked up in that sacred space between relationships, where hopefully we are learning more about ourselves. And I love the way that you phrase that, and I can just feel the emotion in your words and your voice when you talk about heartbreak and heartache, because obviously it's something that you've experienced on a deep level.
What's coming up for me is actually, it's crazy. It's like you're in my head. When we were divorced and separated, in my ego in the whole process, and in my just really shelled protective container, I had been like, I don't even know if I ever loved her. And I was going through this exercise of just deleting her number, deleting all of our pictures, all the social media. And I'm doing, we'd been together 10 years before, by the time we divorced. And so it's 10 years worth of lots of scrolling. And I come up to this picture from our honeymoon where Megan had fallen asleep on a beach chair in Hawaii, no makeup on. We're freshly married, newlyweds. And I I zoomed in on her face and took a picture, because that is the most beautiful thing to me. Like, this woman is just completely beautiful without even having to try. And I hit that picture as I'm going through this exercise and just fucking broke. That was one of the first times I let myself feel anything from this split. And I knew after that moment, I absolutely knew without a doubt, that was love, because I just felt how much it hurt not to have it in my life. And it was just I still was never able to delete that picture. I still have the picture. I freaking love it. But it just was this moment of oh, damn. Okay. Yeah. I know what love is, because I just felt its opposite and it's very, very real.
Yeah. I remember listening to these parents who their kids were playing on the playground, and I think they were 2 or 3. I can't remember, but the kid said, not the parents, the kids. And the kid said to the other, I love you. And the parent said, oh, isn't that funny? He thinks he loves her. And I was like, he does. Isn't that like we try to minimize, but what is going on is this free expression, this like uninhibited, like not love bombing, like
Right.
it's not some trick of this toddler, like I'm gonna get her.
Manipulation.
Right? Like, but the fact that the parent, through their own fears, limits this self-expression, afraid that it's being thrown around, afraid that the child doesn't know. And I think we often do that. Even when I look back at when I said I love you when I was 21, 22, 27, it was different. It was different self-expression. I didn't understand the totality of it. I didn't understand my own toxic behaviors. I didn't understand the way we reacted and danced together. And today I would say that was a more unhealthy or immature version of love. But my God, it was love in its entirety in that moment that I expressed it, because it was the entirety of what I knew. And it's so easy to shame that. It's so beautiful, your story about seeing Megan, because you can't deny, that moment of innocence, that moment of vulnerability. And what a beautiful reminder, and I know you say to experience its opposite. I don't know that I would call it the opposite. I would say it is it. Like the grief of love lost is love. Like that pain is love. And I know I don't mean that in abuse, because of course that gets confused. So for you listening, that's not what I'm saying. That's not love. But like the pain of loss of someone, that's it. That's grief is love. Like it's that. It might be the most potent teacher I've ever had is grief, because it just is like, fuck you, pay attention, like stop running from your shit. And to do it sober is a whole other. The first time I mean, when Kai and I broke up, I was sober. I hadn't drank in 2 years, and I had never navigated heartbreak sober. Woo, that's a whole other
which I think is a perfect segue. We can come back to some of the other
for sure.
some of the others, but I think we know a little bit about your part one and part two that you have with your partner. You know a little bit about our part one and part two. Obviously, there's some similarities there, and I think we know kind of a little bit about how each other was feeling, and the things that we had to like traverse through and move through and navigate through. Could you let us and the listeners in on what actually happened between you and your partner, Kylie, that you have this story now of this part one and part two? What happened?
Yeah, part one. Oof. I mean, part one. I think it's harder when she's not here, so I'll just speak for her like the patriarchy does. Just joking for you listening. I was still in an old pattern of chasing unavailability, of like, never had I on a conscious level been more available and really ready to choose and turn towards love, and never had, I think on some level, Kylie being in that space too. But that was true for me. I'll speak from my experience. And Kylie had been divorced a couple of years before we met. And when we started dating, there was certainly some residual processing that was required in her space. And I had been single for a fair amount of time. I dated a little bit, but nothing really serious. And she had this dream actually about, I want to say it was about 8 months into our relationship. I remember sitting on a bed talking to her in Bronte in Sydney. And I had just gone for a run, and I'd had this awareness of like, I'm just chasing her. Like, I'm the one inviting the next level of commitment, the next conversation, and I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I'm done with that. It feels like the same wound. And so I sat down with her and expressed to her that I really felt this way. She broke down crying, and she was sharing with me that she had this dream that a house was burning. And her understanding of the dream at the time was that it was our relationship, and at some point she would have to leave me. And so she was really feeling called to leave, but she didn't want to leave. And so she didn't trust the dream, but also didn't want to have to go. And so we discussed that, and I talked about how, well, that's kind of hard because now I'm in a relationship with someone who might leave at any moment. The truth of that, though, you know, in hindsight, looking back, is it was exactly what I needed, although painful teacher. And over the next couple of years, we would continue to dialogue about that, but I would always feel, you know, like on a very deep psychological level, it's really hard to be in a relationship with someone who might leave you at any moment.
Mm.
And so that just kept becoming, what was going on was a conversation about children. Like, I want to have kids. I'm ready for that. I was very clear at the very beginning of our relationship about that. And she was in agreement of the timelines I was expressing. These were deal breakers for me. And we were in a conversation and she's like, yeah, you know, that timeline doesn't quite work. I would like a little longer. And I was like, okay, like sitting with it. And I'm like, okay, I could do another year, you know? And I really started to pay attention to that. Like when you're uncertain about things, you usually start to bring up things that you know your partner has as deal breakers, you know, in some way to test them. Like, will you leave me if I push this? Will you? And I didn't really know it fully at the time, but that felt like that was going on. Like it really felt like, like you're renegotiating this deal breaker. What are we not actually dealing with? And so we dated for about, I want to say 5 years. And in the last part, the conversations were just like, listen, this is what I want. If you don't want that, that's okay. Like, I love you. And that doesn't change. If you leave, you have to go. You have to go. But I can't consciously choose this relationship unless we're moving towards a similar place. And I was not willing to negotiate on what was the future relationship I wanted to create, because I knew I could create that. And I wanted to create it with her. And I was also totally okay if she didn't want to or couldn't and had to go. And so we had that conversation a few times. We went and sought deeper help. You know, she was especially constantly wanting to learn. It's really fascinating because, like, this often happens in relationship. You know, she identified as, what's wrong with me that I can't choose this relationship? And so what do I need to fix or heal or figure out or navigate from my childhood or whatever it is? And, you know, there was a point where I was like, okay, do I have to leave now? And I remember asking myself, do I have more to learn here? And the answer was yes. And I was like, damn it. Okay. Fuck. And we worked with a psychotherapist who had worked with us quite a few times. We love his work. And we got back from that. And I remember having this immense amount of sadness because I was like, where did I learn? And I just feel it as I'm saying it. Where did I learn that it was normal to be in a relationship with someone who didn't choose me fully? Like, where did I learn to tolerate that? Like, I had so much sadness for the part of myself that I was like, this has become normalized. And that grief was so important. I just remember sitting with it being like, oh, like never again. I was really getting to that place of never again. And and for Kylie too, like, where did it become normalized that she was the issue? And, you know, it created kind of a hierarchy in a relationship unknowingly, not on purpose. But I said to her, like, if this relationship requires that you feel like there's something wrong with you, then the relationship construct itself is not healthy. Like, then neither of us can meet each other, because I'm getting this to be part of the hierarchy where I'm not the one who's the problem and you have to constantly think you're a problem. And then I get to unconsciously take advantage of that or not have to look at my own stuff. and I was never not willing to look at my own stuff. I was very conscious as soon as these things became aware, we became aware of, they were always confronted. But you look at all these subtle subconscious ways that you avoid yourself, that you maintain upper hands in relationships so that you don't have to be met. And I was giving a talk recently, and I just had this, like, the version of me that chose Kylie in the previous version of her. I was so afraid of a woman. Like, I was so afraid of being seen. I was so afraid of being met. I was so afraid of being loved. And I think it was probably because I just I'd experienced heartbreak at the hands of a woman. You know, I'd experienced betrayal. I'd experienced being lied to. I experienced that I couldn't stand up for myself, you know, that I wasn't capable of really protecting myself in the company of one, because I was still a boy. And it was that moment where, you know, we just realized there was nothing else we could do. Like, we had both done everything. And I remember her saying to me, you know, why would you stay? Like, why wouldn't you just go? And I was like, no, like, this is not you're not getting away with it that way. Like, if you got to go, you got to go, but it's actually really important you choose it. Because I knew for her own growth, for my growth, it was just standing with I won't be with someone who can't fully choose me and knows that they do. But for her, it was actually it being okay that she left, that she chose that. She trusted herself. And so we really navigated the ending, and it was such a beautiful growth opportunity because both of us got to sort of walk these paths we'd never walked. We both witnessed each other walking them. And then when it ended, it was over. Like, I was fully, you know, ready to move on. I was, at that point, I'd done everything I could, you know, and I was ready to choose someone after, you know, I was done the healing process. I was really ready to choose that life, to choose someone fully, to be chosen fully. And, you know, when I look in hindsight, I'm like, man, did women ever try? But I ran from those ones. You know, and in that space, we, you know, she really dove deep into wanting to understand more her patterns. She did a lot of healing, and for me, I was trying to return to old patterns, and then really just dove into myself too, and the grieving process, and just continuing to move forward. I really lived my breakup very out loud. I shared a lot of the process. We did a closing ceremony. That was the hardest shit I've ever done.
But
Oh man, I'd never, you know, there's a woman I had on my podcast. Her name is, do you need to get that?
no.
Okay.
The package.
Yeah. There's a woman I had on my podcast. Her name's Yoda, which is a great name for what she said to
Totally.
me. Yeah. She said, one should leave a relationship as they leave their house, you know, fix it up and prepare it for the next person, which that sounds so hard to do. And because the last thing you want is another, like, fuck you getting in my house.
Yeah.
You know, but I thought, wow, I've never left a relationship with grace and reverence for the teacher that it is and she was. And the closing ceremony, that was, I remember sitting in my car, we'd agreed upon it. We'd Googled it. We agreed upon like what was going to be the steps, the questions we were going to do. We made it very sacred. We lit a fire. And ironically, we had bought a sort of like birdhouse to represent the house. That was part of her dream. And we burnt that. And
wow.
It was a really beautiful process. We had, the first part of it was that we shared what were we most grateful for about the other person. Man, it was
damn. Man,
wow.
this is next level. Wow.
I was sitting in my car, I remember right before being like, I don't want to do this shit.
Yeah.
And I remember asking myself, do I not want to do it because it demands more of me than I know exists? Or do I just generally not want to do it? And of course, the answer was the first one. I got emotional thinking about it just because it was honestly the most beautiful thing I've ever done.
Wow.
The second one was, what memory was I most grateful for? Ugh, that was the hardest. That was just crying constantly. And the last one was, what did we hope for the other person? That authentically was hard to do. We were both like, like, I hope for a good life for you, but like, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Like, I hope for you to find what you see can. But that was actually very hard, and we both authentically own that in the moment. But it was a release, and it made me think of like, why isn't that normal practice? That ending was in no way a failure. It was such an act of love to release it.
Yeah.
And I know you both can relate very deeply to
that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, that is, I mean, I feel it with you, and I'm like trying to keep it together just listening to you, because it's those, we certainly did not have any sort of closing ceremony. But I just commend you both for that act of courage and grace, because even though in that moment, or however long it lasted, like, it was probably so fucking hard and difficult, even though you knew it was necessary. Like, we need to do this. We're feeling called into this. But if that was normalized, that sort of like graceful send off, how much less trauma people moving on to the next relationship, moving into some sort of healing space. It's almost like you still have the wound, but now you have a little band-aid over it. It's kind of protected a little bit, rather than just a raw, open, gaping wound as you go about your life. It's like it still exists under there, but it's covered up a little bit. It's protected. It's in the process of healing. And man, just so many props, and just holy craps to you guys, because that's no joke.
I feel like at least for a year and a half after we split up, 99% of my decisions were out of a place of trauma, a place of revenge, or I'm going to show her, the family, the community that we came out of, that I'm better than ever, or whatever. And it does really make me curious, if this was a practice and a protocol for really any relationship that was moving on or transitioning, what that could potentially solve from these various behaviors that take place after a relationship. But did you see that? Can you directly correlate during the breakup some of your behavior patterns and being benefited by this ceremony?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, I was 40-ish or 40. I think I was 41. I was 41 when we went through that, maybe 40, turning 41. And when I went through my previous engagement, the thing that sort of birthed my interest in relationship, my response was not to have a closing ceremony. It was to drink and try to hook up with women, which soothes a lot of things, but it doesn't deal with anything. And so, I wish I had had a more mature response. I really wanted to prove to people, and to, I would say most of my breakups before, till I had some level of relational awareness, were revenge, like, trying to get as fit as I could, trying to prove to them I was happy, posting a picture of whatever it is that indicates my fake happiness.
Totally. Yeah.
Posting a Taylor Swift quote. And in that, this for sure was different. I mean, one, I didn't give a fuck what other people thought about it. That was the first thing, because I knew that we were navigating with such grace. And I'd never, because a lot of the questions I got was like, well, as someone who teaches relationship, were you concerned about how it might affect your brand? I'm like,
Right,
well,
right.
first off, I don't give a fuck because my brand was never built on being together.
Yeah.
It was built on being true to yourself.
Yeah, man.
You know,
Hell yeah.
and when I first started writing about relationship, I would get that a lot. Why would I take advice from somebody who's single? And I would always reply, well, first off, you don't have to. That's the beauty of discernment.
Yeah. Right.
And I said the second part is that is under the assumption that people in relationships are good at them. And we know that's not necessarily true. And so because I'd always lived that as my message, I actually was not concerned, but I also wanted to welcome people into the process in some way that I didn't know this at the time, but like Kylie and I lived our breakup very differently. She went inward, and I, with her permission, shared my process and shared about the things. And really, I feel like my deeper intent there was for people to just maybe on some level, not to be given permission by me, but to be given permission through my willingness to share, that they might find some solace in their own heartbreak, but they also might find some process that would release them from this constant pursuit of new person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that we could let go and be more loving and more deepened and more fulfilled. And that heartbreak, really, I don't know a better catalyst to transformation. Like it is the cocoon. It is the most potent, you know, and if you're willing to accept it, if you're willing, as Francis Weller would say, if you're willing to let it cook you, you know, you will be ripened in a way that you never knew. And so I mean, our community was amazing because we were never like, you have to choose between me or her, or if that even came up, I would be, which it didn't, but if it did, I would say like, there's not a choice here. Like, love both of us,
Mhm.
you know, like the other thing too is, I mean, if we were both invited to something, I was like, nah, like ain't fucking going to that. Like when I'm in healing mode, anyone who's taken my breakup course knows, like, I don't fuck around. Like I'm like in the zone. I prioritize myself. I prioritize everybody I teach. That is like, your healing is the number one priority. And if you're trying to coddle their feelings in your own growth and your own healing, they can't happen. Both of those can't exist. You could be graceful with their feelings, but like, if them watching your Instagram story triggers you, like block them, unfollow them, tell them you can't, it's derailing your healing, you know? So our community was super supportive. You know, I think of our parents, they were both incredible. I wrote her parents a message just with so much gratitude. My dad and mom asked if they could write her. And of course I was like, yeah. So it was really, honestly, such a beautiful process.
Yeah.
That's probably what made, I mean, having no contact was fucking hard.
Right.
You know, you know,
It's a death. I mean, basically,
Yeah.
you're grieving.
Yeah,
you have to live your life now as if that person died.
Mhm.
Unless you want to, like you said, you know, derail your healing, which so many people do, where it's like, well, let's still continue to be friends. Or, you know, maybe it wasn't like a completely toxic breakup and you still like care about the person, obviously. And so it's like, well, yeah, let's still stay friends on social media. Let's still have some of the same friend group. Let's still go to the same events. It's like, I don't know if that's realistic for most people because it seems like the healthiest way to go about the rest of your life is mourning a death, really.
Yeah, it is. And to feel the space that they were in, you know,
Yeah.
that whenever anyone says to me like, oh, they left and they took, you know, everything with them, not the material stuff, because that does happen. But like, took a part of me, that language to me is so fascinating because it indicates that we were completed by them.
Yep.
Yep.
You think of that like
Codependency.
famous line of
Jerry Maguire.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a beautiful line, we all thought.
Yeah.
You complete me. And then everyone's like, I wish my partner would say that, but
Yeah.
but you don't.
Yeah.
Because when something ends, not only do you realize its gift, but you also realize its weight. And whenever anyone says something to the effect of they took everything or I lost everything, I'm like, what did you give them?
Yeah.
Like, go get it back.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
the idea that they complete you, or even that they made me happy, that again doesn't take responsibility for self. All that language is so important to navigate, because then it says, well, if they make me happy, then that means happiness is found in the other, which means that I will always seek it in relationship. And then my relationships will always be the source of that, even if they're the source of my validation, or I feel loved because I'm in a relationship versus not. Then my relationship will always come with the condition of completing me. And then it is far too great a weight for someone else to hold. It's also not their actual responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
It's unfair.
It really is. Because then every conversation hinges upon that. Every delicate conflict hinges upon that. And that's way too much. Those moments can't carry that too, but most relationships, they do.
It also stifles growth, or if it doesn't stifle it, it actually makes growth potentially problematic as people evolve. Because if you're, what we're talking about, you complete me, you fill this gap that I have, it works initially. It can mimic deep connection and foster deep connection, but it's really the filling of deficiencies that just so happen to actually sort of puzzle piece style. But as humans evolve, which we do, heads up, like we change. And as those changes take place, the gaps are exposed, the deficiencies are exposed. I think a lot of times this is what leads to relationship issues, because it's like, hey, you're not doing this thing for me anymore.
Yeah.
You're not filling my deficiency anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's this, we use the Jerry Maguire quote all the time. It's
Jerry Maguire got it
it's
wrong.
like, I complete me. And it's not, I can't live without you. Ideally, it's I can live without you. I just don't fucking want to. Like, I really don't want to, because I'm really fucking into this.
And that's more romantic. I think that line of "you complete me" is like codependency completely romanticized, where we're looking at it and we're like, oh, that's the epitome of love. But you're pegging yourself. You're putting yourself in a hole that now it's like, okay, well, I can't change or grow or evolve, because now your happiness is dependent on me staying the same. And it does. It stifles growth and freedom, which, heads up, everybody, if you haven't figured it out by now, freedom is the epitome of love. It has to be unconditional. The moment we put conditions on love, it's not love anymore. It is conditional agreement. And, it's something that I wish we would have learned in premarital counseling. Our premarital counseling was a fucking joke. And, I think that sadly, that's taught to a lot of people, is getting into marriage is, I take care of your needs and you take care of mine and we're covered. We're good. Right. And I think that is completely unfair to one another. You just don't realize it in the moment because it sounds romantic, but really the art and act of, I can live without you, I just don't want to. That to me is more romantic than staying shackled because you said I do, because like I signed a legal document, I'm in this, okay, versus like I'm showing up, because I want us to be free together and to create a life that we love together as two wholes, not completing each other, but, creating this third entity with our love. I think that's when relationships go from codependent to co-creative is how we usually phrase it. It feels like you're creating something together with your very full independent lives.
Yeah. And that commitment to the sacredness of it, that the connection itself becomes this sacred gateway between us, as opposed to, requiring each other. It's an interesting conundrum, right? Because like what you're saying is, wait, well, if I could live without you, then that's not romantic under the traditional definitions of romanticism. Not to mention the idea of, Disney really creates this story. One, there's really fucked up thing about Disney is it always has a kid's parent die, which is totally fucked up. I just got to say that. That's fucked up.
They've got to be odds are all against them, right?
It's just so dirty to play on a child because it plays on their fear of them losing their parent. I just, again, that's psychological fuckery. But the other message that the woman, this is more historical, it's not as true in the later ones that we're seeing, like Encanto and things like that today, are Frozen, but that the woman needs to be in some sort of distress and the man needs to be this invulnerable savior. You think about that, like just in the model of religion, the male is the priest, and then, the women are the nuns, or depending on the religious construct, but the male is always held in sort of the highest position of power generally. And you think of like all these messages that are sent that just continue to reinforce the invulnerability and the exploitation of power for men, or even the idea that they don't have to show up or do things differently or learn relational things, because inherent in their status is that they are being chosen. And then we try to retain that. I think of just the small hierarchy, but it's giant when you're in it, of like, hey, I'm figuring this out and I've got to figure it out. And Kai is the problem that has to figure out how to, right? Like the same structure exists in that, the same codependent structure. And so like we required each other to keep our wounds alive as opposed to heal them, which is really what's being invited in the exact same moment, in that through awareness and dialogue can occur. But the liberating experience of stepping out of codependency puts us into individuation and sovereignty, which we likely have never been, we've never witnessed, because it's not in the constructs of our systems. It's not in the constructs of our movie narratives. It's not in the constructs of our religions. And so literally every system has to die as you liberate yourself in love, which, how beautiful, but also how fucking momentous is that?
Right. Seriously.
Right. It's like everything, the Matrix is revealed in a lot of ways. And you have to really take hyper responsibility for the ways that we subtly individually exploit power in whatever way we do, by being needed, by being in suffering, by being in problem, by being in whatever, and by paying for things, because the male usually falls into that, by seeking status, by women seeking desirability, men seeking desirability in different ways. And like us just really calling those things out, the subtle ways we do that. It's terrifying, because in the co-creating of a relationship, because you think like, if your growth threatens the relationship, then that means that the relationship, to maintain stability, requires you to stay the same, like till death do us part.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but I really always consider that vow. And I think, what death? Like the death of the mortal self, or the death of the version of us that chose the relationship? And if we get more sort of esoteric on it, then we think, okay, well, the self is always dying in every moment. But if the actual container of the relationship doesn't honor that, as the relationship keeps dying too, because the relationship has to continuously die. So if the vows themselves keep you prisoner to the moment you made the commitment, not allowing the commitment to grow, the commitment to evolve, because like, I really saw, like I said to Kai, like, if our relationship requires that you have a problem, and then we can't meet each other, but also that we both have, it becomes a prison because we're two good people. And I know you both experienced a similar thing. It's like two good people who there's a narrative around. Then if that's the reason we're staying, then that's not actually a reason, And I thought, wow, what a different thing to, instead of making forever an expectation, it becomes an intention. And then it guides each moment, each morning, each day. And then you just realize the value of choice. You realize, like, out of everyone in the world, Kylie chooses me.
Yeah.
Like, she could choose so many dudes. And like, I know that. And yet she chooses me. That should be the fuel every day to, like, I don't always respond perfectly. I don't always, but man, to come back to that each morning to say, what do I need to do today to honor such a sacred commitment? Oh,
seriously.
And that's not like the foundation of most relationships, because who teaches us that?
Right. Well, when
Pain and heartache.
when you pivot from expectation into intention, when you're constantly fixed upon an expectation or an outcome, you literally miss out on everything that has to do with the present moment.
Yes.
So literally just by pivoting that into intention, you're reintroducing the possibility for awe, for beauty, for creativity,
surprise,
for the freedom to show up new and evolved. And hey, what are you thinking today? What are you into today? What are you interested in today? Because I want to know. My intention is to stay curious. And that is such a that's a fun experience.
Very fun.
That's a fun relationship.
That you'll never know them.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's really like,
that's cool.
At the foundation of, we had a podcast episode recently about keeping the spark alive and, talking about what is the spark between two people. Maybe they just met and they're glued to each other and nothing else exists. They are locked in and fully present. But sometimes there's this like, where have you been all my life? I feel like I've known you forever, but it's also in combination with so much genuine curiosity about this person. You are hanging on every word that they say because you want to know, like, oh man, just fire hose me with information. Like, I want to know all about you. And that is, I think, one of the pillars of the spark, this magnetic draw to each other. And for whatever reason, that familiarity sort of becomes a detriment later, where it's like, I already know. I know him better than anyone. I can finish his sentences. I can order for him at a restaurant. I know him. And that's, I think, another, I would say myth of relationship, that familiarity isn't a detriment. And really, we try to keep curiosity for each other. We're going on 16 years now being together. And I want to keep knowing little siesta, little hiatus a few years ago. But, I want to keep learning about you because, hey, everybody, like, newsflash, that is a piece that keeps the spark alive. That is the flirt, the fire, the fuck, the passion that can stay in the relationship, but you have to choose it. It's going to look a little bit different. Chase says this so beautifully about, the ingredients required for that spark. They are different to keep it alive than just in the beginning when it was just organic and natural. It requires a different set of ingredients to keep it alive and keep it flowing than it just appearing sort of involuntarily in the beginning of your relationship.
Yeah, it's so interesting what you're saying, because I think it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning too, about God, and you were saying too, Chase, that like when you get that alive to the curiosity and the unknown, and that you will never know your partner, like you will never know the incessant mystery she or he or they are, and that keeps, as you said, that keeps you present, and that's where mystery and wonder and miracles are found, and that's where the experience of awe is found. That's where God is found, or whatever word we would use for that. And what a cool thing to sort of like, when I look at Kai from that space of like her being a deity, her being this mystical being, and she truly is. Like, I hardly understand a lot of the things she says because they're so deep and profound, and I have to get her to translate them to regular speak, and sometimes I experience envy or insecurity around the depth that she has and the way that she dances in the world. And then I'm able to observe like my desire, but instead of sitting in envy, just wanting to continuously learn from her, which challenges the constructs that society says, like, what could I learn from a woman? Oh my God, everything. Because isn't that what the earth isn't
Yeah.
that, you know, I think it's so beautiful when it comes around so full circle. And Dr. Alexander Solomon talks about how like throughout your life, you'll be married many times, sometimes to the same person. And I have always loved that quote because it just reminds me so much of the constant death birth cycle, that if the relationship honors that, like if it honors growth, like if the sacredness of the connection is actually contributed to by the expansion of not just ourselves, but our partners. I do think if we feel like we know our partners, there's probably an idea that we feel like we know ourselves too. Like we've lost the mystery to self.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, you're viewing your partner through the lens that is you. So that's the same lens that you're viewing yourself, right? I think that that's an important distinction, is there is no distinction with how you're viewing yourself and how you approach your own growth. It is mirrored by how you look at or approach your partner's growth, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's part of the reason we're in this work is we love it so much, and it's so transferable to so many other lanes, and taking
like everything, right?
Literally everything. And it's like, I'm so confident at 31 that if I feel like things are out of control or I'm feeling uneasy about something, it doesn't have to be in the relationship, but just in life in general, if I lean into this, like this is connection to God, this is self-discovery, this is meaning of the universe, this is how I find health, this is how I find purpose and fulfillment. And it's just such a path for wisdom and understanding that it's like I do have to keep reminding myself, but I can just lean into this, and that will provide some light on whatever I am going through externally. So it's, take us through a little bit of the reconciliation. Like, you guys go through this, and I'm forgetting what you called it when we were on your show.
The sacred pause.
The sacred pause. You go through the sacred pause, and then take us through a little bit how you guys come back together.
Yeah. So we had a no contact rule for like, I want to say it was 3 months. And then through a mutual friend, we communicated to, okay, well, we're going to have a conversation. So we had a conversation right before Christmas. We actually spent New Year's together. And then we were like, no, this doesn't feel aligned. Like, okay, so let's go back to like communicating, but like friendship. And then I had this awareness when I was at a retreat. I was in Hawaii, and I remember just thinking to myself, like, she's still dictating the level of depth that this connection has. Like, she still is deciding what communication we have, and I was like, nope, like I'm not. And so I had that conversation with her, that I felt that. And she was like, she's so good at receiving feedback and just postulating and really taking responsibility. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to share friendship or partnership or relationship with anyone who sort of marinates in the conversation. And she was like, yeah, I can totally see that is true for you and true of this experience. And so we agreed to not talk again for a while. And she was going through her process. At the time, she was doing a man talks, she called it, like a detox. And it's funny because when I was teaching that stuff, I called it a dong detox. It shows you how different our brains are. And a Vaj vacation. That's what I call them. And really, those are very good terms for the exact, very good terms for the exact same process. Although hers sounded a lot more spiritual than when I say it. So she went through that process, and she replied to a story of mine actually on Instagram after that container had closed, and her man talks. And then she was like, do you want to have coffee? And I was like, yeah, I do. Okay. So then we had a conversation, and she was like, I'm ready to explore this again. I'm ready to choose this fully. Like, this is what I want. Yeah. It was a good coffee. And I had a lot of excitement about it, but I had a lot of trepidation because there had been so much I choose this, but it not actually being fully true. And so I brought that forward, and the space of our sort of dating and then coming back together was filled with those real conversations, and our commitment in relationship 2.0 was to the truth ahead of everything, to that being the thing that her and I both held most sacred, that we would just always honor the truth, and then we would always honor each other's truth.
Yeah.
We had this in our first relationship. We were both like, she's from Vegas, I'm from Calgary. And we were both like, we will never live in each other's hometown. Like, this is a commitment that she was like, I will never live in Calgary. That's winter beyond winter. And then, I was like, Vegas? No, like that ain't happening. And it's funny because in relationship 2.0, I remember being really actually afraid to say to her that I was feeling called back to Calgary. I was just feeling called back there. I didn't know why. And she said, I was so afraid to tell her because I'm like, ugh. I mean, I got to honor what I'm feeling called towards in some way, but I just wanted to figure out how we could do that. And she said, I trust your feeling. And that was it. So,
wow.
Yeah, the second relationship was and is very much about recognizing what hooks we have or what ways we, at the very beginning, it was a lot of healing, a lot of repairing, a lot of rebuilding trust, but she would always come back with, I choose you, I'm not going anywhere. And yeah, I needed to hear that one.
Yeah. Damn.
Every time she said it, I was like, ugh, like it was like healing something that and touching something that was so deep within me that I didn't want to trust, like there was
yeah.
It was like, oh, she really means business this time. And and I can really say that through that transformation, I really stepped so much more into adulthood. I stepped into manhood in a different way. And because I trusted myself and she trusted herself. And I really, what came back in that first reunion was a woman in every way. And so there was a part of me that was so excited and ready for that, but also terrified because I'd been running from the sort of conceptual nature of that for well over a decade. And I couldn't hide anymore. Like this was it. And so, yeah, that was the reunion, was really about that.
Man,
wow.
that just, it lights up so much in me, especially as it pertains to being able to trust and receive what, that she's choosing you. That's been such a theme for me in our part too, is that when Megan says something that is like, I love you, I'm in this, there's a part of me that goes, really? Like,
yeah.
Like,
yeah, same.
Really? And so it's been
sure?
Yeah, like it's been such a practice for me to just receive that and believe it, knowing that if she chooses me and I receive that and accept it and believe it, that I am similarly accepting myself and believing myself to be in this part too completely. And so I'll voice it. I'll say like, I receive that. I believe you. I did have a little word that came up that said, really? And so, and it's been a process of like talking through that over, now 3 years of being back together, to where it does, it moves on. And then, man, on the other side of that little hesitation is just fucking bliss. It's just fucking awesome.
Yeah. And I appreciate you, I've shared this with him, but I appreciate you sharing those little moments with me, because similarly, like, we are devoted to the truth of what we're experiencing. And we've learned that suppression of the truth or feelings in whatever capacity is not healthy for either one of us. And so we've devoted ourselves to that. And I would add that, as the person who hears that, really? Like, are you sure? It can sting a little bit, because you're the only one that knows your intentions, right? Like, he can't feel my intention that's happening inside my body. So it does sting a little bit, but I find myself in that moment saying, of course you feel that way. Having compassion for their experience, not blaming them, not shaming them, not judging them. And I think that that's something that is important to navigate when one person is feeling that, because it does require compassion on my part to be like, yeah, I totally see why that would come up for you. All I can do, the only thing that I can do is keep showing up. The only thing, there's nothing I can say. There's nothing, I don't even want to try to convince you. The only thing that I can do is show you with my actions and my continued unconditional love.
Yeah.
And that I am continually here and I'm not going anywhere. That's literally the only thing I can do. So I think there's a responsibility to both sides where it's not my job to heal that, and it's not your job to suppress it or protect me from that little sting, which you being so in tune with the feminine feelings and everything, you in a previous life, you might have tried to protect me from that. And so I think it does require.
Or like holding it in some like power,
like a power move or like a
something.
one-upping or like you owe me this or using it as a weapon to injure or whatever. And I would say, I haven't said this about us a lot, but I'm really proud of us and how we have navigated that and just sharing our authentic feelings with each other and not making the other wrong for what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so beautiful because it puts each other in relationship with the parts we may not like about ourselves, or for, I don't want to say this is true for Kylie, but in my questioning of what she's saying is a time when it wasn't true. And so there's an experience of maybe shame or an experience of there is truth sometimes to those words previously, but that the sacred ability of the relationship is to hold the shadow too. Mm-hmm. And so you're actually in relationship with all of the other person, which is really lovely. Like what a thing for the relationship to be able to hold. And for the times that I did hold back that little voice or that little thing, which is codependent. Like now I'm saying, I don't trust you with everything that I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. And so you can't hold it. But really I'm just perpetuating the exact same message because you're never being expanded by it. And I'm always feeling contracted by it. And then we're never liberated. Yeah. And there's that subtle codependency. I remember a woman writing me once saying, my partner and I, we are crushing it. Like we're everything. He's able to communicate. I am blah, blah. But, I just feel like there's not attraction now. Mm-hmm. And there isn't now. And I was like, do you hold back the truth in any way? Mm-hmm. Does he hold back the truth in any way? No. We tell each other, we talk about everything. I'm like, when you're intimate, do you tell him the truth of how it feels or what you really need? And she said, no, because sometimes I'm afraid to hurt his feelings or like afraid that, and I was like, that's it. Like, so while he's chowing down, that's the scientific term for what's going on. You're thinking about his feelings instead of what would inform your experience and actually improve your experience. And also you're protecting him from actually experiencing that and providing you with the full experience, the full chow. And I didn't use chow in the conversation, but great inserting it now. But she was like, oh, wow. Like that. It's those subtle, it can be that subtle that kills attraction. Because we were talking about spark. Spark is taken away when you have to caretake. Yeah. Spark is taken away where you don't have space for yourself or other. Mm-hmm. Spark, like Esther Perel talks about the difference between love and I think what does she call it? Attraction or love, and she uses another word. But this idea of lust and love.
Desire.
Yeah, desire.
She talks about desire a lot.
Love and desire. That's right. And she talks about how like love needs familiarity and closeness and desire needs distance. And I like to just sort of think of it in a different way too, which is that desire gets killed by enmeshment. Like desire needs space. And that's that beautiful dance of like, how do I hold on to me and be in love with you and not give away me and not ask that you give away you? Because as soon as that, like you were talking about adventure and curiosity, as soon as those things are gone and we blame the relationship for them being gone, or like, I don't follow my own passions, or I don't speak my own truth, and I blame you for that, I'm not going to want to bang you. Like I blame you for that.
Yeah.
And so that fall from grace that we talk about, where people go from love in the honeymoon phase to this more romantic best friend kind of love, can be informed by this maintaining of what you guys were talking about too, this curiosity, this commitment to mystery, this going on actual adventures, because your brain actually mistakes the person for the novelty of the adventure. So what a great mistake that is.
Yeah.
Might as well hook up while you're doing it.
Yeah. Totally. I love that. Yeah. She talks a lot about, I was just literally reading some of her quotes today, talking about how desire requires uncertainty. The reason why that initial spark feels so sparky is because there is the chance that you might not go home with them, or this might not work out, or you might not have a great time with them or whatever. And after 20 years, it's like, no, I pretty much know what this experience
She's
is
already
be.
at home. Fuck.
Yeah. Right.
And in bed.
I like this one quote she has where she says, if you're newly dating and you tell your partner, or if you tell that person no, they might just go on to another partner, another lover. But if you're in a marriage and your partner says no, they have to stay with you, technically. And so it's informing this, like, we already know what's going to happen. You kind of like stuck with me. And the uncertainty, the curiosity, I think all of it is one: curiosity, uncertainty, and adventure. Absolutely. Such pillars of the spark.
Yeah, totally.
Recognizing that they could leave you. Like that, she talks about that your partner can leave you at any time. Yeah, that's fucking true. I remember getting my hair cut by this woman once, where she was like, yeah, her and her friend were talking. I was at a salon, this happens. They were talking while I was getting my hair cut. And she was like, oh, well, you just got married. You don't have to give blowjobs anymore. And I was like, actually, let me just.
I hope you spoke up.
I did, for sure. Okay, I was like, actually. But I realized that the woman talking about it was far from help at that point. Just because, like, if that's your mindset, that you only did it to get, or you're like, now you're in this, you don't have to is even the wrong word, but that act of care or love or service for one another, whatever it might be, that it's just now you don't have to do it anymore because they married you.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Like that just shows you that they didn't enter the relationship with so many puns with sex, but they didn't enter the relationship with that reverence. Like that sacredness. And so many of us, because we are systemized and socialized into just automation, even about love and relationship, that we all just choose it based on the qualities we think are important, and also by what will other people think. Will this satisfy what my God will approve of, or what my family will approve of? And it's a beautiful truth to wake up to when we're in it, because we realize that the true richness of life is so beyond what is normal. Like a normal life, great. Like some people don't want expansive relationships. Some people don't want that's great. I don't want normal. I don't want normal love. I don't want normal life. I don't want normal communication. I don't want normal friendships. I don't want normal anything. Because
we know how it plays out. Normal, common, average, the definition, we already know what that is. We already know what that is as defined. We see it everywhere. I literally just put up a post today that was like, the Medicin podcast is like, our goal is to push back on the norm, the common, the average. And it's like, if you want the mainstream script for happiness, cool, you do you, boo. Like, if that's what you want to create with your life, that's totally fine. There's nothing inherently wrong. I think the wrongness, I'm putting that in quotes because nothing is wrong. It just is. But I think it's when people are trying to create what they see other people creating or have created, whether it's family or friends or on social media or TV. and they're not choosing it actively. They're not choosing it consciously. They're not having the conversation with their partner that's like, hey, what do we want to create together? What do we want our life to look like? They're just mimicking, kind of seeing what other people are putting on their canvas. And they're like, okay, I'm going to try to paint the same picture. And, holy crap, this isn't making me happy. Well, no shit.
We oftentimes get asked, hey, you're guys going to get married again.
Yeah.
And we have found ourselves using this analogy, and there's probably some holes in it, but we end up using it anyway, where, if love is the ocean, the way that our marriage looked and the way that I think many marriages look is that you just put on a life jacket and you jump in the ocean of love, and you can kind of fuck around a little bit. You don't really have to work very hard. And there's this flotation device that keeps you floating in love. Well, for us, that they ultimately broke, and we learned that we didn't know how to swim.
Yeah.
So I would prefer to be treading water and swimming in the ocean of love, and not subscribe to the traditional structures of, how our world is spelled out marriage to look, and just be open to the changing waves, the changing tides of what love is, and choose my partner through my, ability to swim and tread water on repeat, versus be kind of bandaged by this flotation device, if you will. So we definitely find ourselves with that question, and then creatively trying to, use an analogy around it. But
I love it.
Yeah.
Imagine being at the court when they're like, wait, this is the same fucking person.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. You guys already did this.
Yeah.
Like
why did you get divorced? Why would you bother?
Yeah.
Not realizing the immensely important catalyst that was to the
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
2.0.
we want to throw a few questions your way. We get questions all the time from our community. Obviously some that are ourselves, and so much appreciation for you and your story. It's just incredible. But we're going to rip through maybe just a few different kind of like relationship-y questions that we often get.
Sure.
And so I'll just start firing away. But one that often comes up is, how does one person reestablish trust in a relationship after it has been violated or broken? What would you answer to that?
Well, the person who betrayed the trust has got to, on some level, agree with whatever is required from the person whose trust was broken. I think a lot of the times they'll say, oh, you can't ask for that, or you can't do that. Literally, the person whose trust was betrayed can decide, what do I need in order to regain or rebuild this trust? And the other person can decide that that's not okay, and they don't want to do that. But the person who was betrayed gets to decide what are their deal breakers and what do they need. And it can happen. It's just that both people need to be really committed to that process. And there is an element of atonement that is required from the person who betrayed. Like, you might be tired of hearing it, or you thought you navigated that, but on a deeper level, you must not have if it's still coming up, and I think sometimes the fracturing of trust can be weaponized against someone over time because they realize there can be power derived from that. But really, the desire to use that power is because they still really don't trust the person. And so if the goal is going to end up with that type of hierarchy, you will never really be able to fully repair. And also the person seeking to potentially rebuild the trust they lost in someone, like the person who's the quote unquote victim of the experience, they can just, will this ever be repairable? Like, do you actually want to? Sometimes after people go through infidelity, they have no interest, and that's okay. Just like we shame people who stay, during infidelity, we often shame people who leave for when there isn't infidelity. But when there is, all of a sudden there's a reason. I think that's why a lot of people in a relationship, this is going beyond the question, but I think this happens a lot, is you don't have to leave the relationship to leave a relationship. And often because we're afraid of leaving one just because we want to, we often abandon the relationship, and then in some ways push away our partners so severely and sever any intimacy, and then they go and find it somewhere else, and then we leave, and there's a reason for us leaving now. I'm not saying that's always true, but I think it often happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I do like the like setting a container. Like, what do you need in order to feel like you can trust this person? And every person's answer is probably going to be different. Everyone needs to come like there's no rules. There's no like set of guidelines that is like, oh, you got to do boom, 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 boom. I think it becomes this like recipe that if both people are in it and they love each other and they want to make it work genuinely, then I think that your answer is beautiful. Where it's like, if the person doesn't want to give what the other person is asking for in order to trust, and it's like that's you have that decision, you have that freedom as well. I think that that's really important, and the weaponizing I feel like is common as well, where it's like now I have something to hold over your head for the rest of our relationship and I will use it whenever I can. And clearly that, to your point, that's like, clearly it's not healed. If you feel like you need to use it as a weapon to get the person to do what you want them to do, then that's like, you need to do some deeper healing, or maybe really get down to what it is that you need from the person to, in order to truly heal. Yeah.
Question around trauma from childhood, or maybe trauma from a previous relationship. How critical, would you say is it to address those, traumatic moments if they're not quite healed? And then is that a process that can take place together in relationship, or should that be something that is individualized?
Probably a bit of both. And I mean, I think the word trauma probably means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So they might differentiate them as like capital T versus small t trauma. I want to be mindful though, because someone's experience of what someone else might call a small t trauma is actually a very large trauma to someone else. And so there's, we talk about this idea of sort of creating a hierarchy of trauma, but it really isn't. It's so subjective. It's a personal experience. I think, our traumas generally occur in relationship. And I think that's where they often get their kind of final touches of healing. So I think that is required in a lot of ways: a relationship with a therapist, relationship with a trauma therapist, relationship with a somatic therapist. That's usually how we learn how to co-regulate again, like be in connection with someone else who's a trustworthy person that allows us to rebuild trust in humanity and learn how to regulate our own nervous systems. I think trauma work should almost always involve nervous system work. And it should involve the exploration of self first. Again, first, and like it can be both, like someone's previous, let's say, sexual trauma. Again, I'm not an expert in this specific stuff. So but my thoughts would be that they would probably want to explore that with a trauma therapist first, who's an expert in that space. And at the same time, get skills and tools to learn how to bring intimacy back into connection and to heal trust in those spaces. I mean, it's essential that we learn how to do that, that we learn how to navigate that with another. Because, you kind of like, when I think about just relational growth, you do all this work on your own, you think you got your poop in a group, and then you start dating, and then you're like, I thought I fucking fixed that, or I healed that. And, when we heal triggers, it's not that they go away, because they're actually beautiful radars and warning signs. It's just what we do with them that changes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that.
Thank you. So we've mentioned it a few times, this concept of novelty in relationship and how it relates to keeping the spark alive. Can you share some ways that most people could do just that? Keep the novelty alive, keep the spark alive, and maybe, reference from things that have worked for you and Kylie as far as novelty and spark.
Well, new things. I mean, I can't say enough about that. Like in the research, when they looked at people who did date nights, date nights are great. Sure. Having a date night every week, awesome. That's better than not having one. But, like if you do the same thing every date night, you're not really getting much mystery. You're not getting any sort of newness. And so in the research, when they looked at when couples did something that was new to one or both people, their relational satisfaction went up significantly. So just saying like, hey, to the other person, like you take turns, who's planning date night. Maybe you have a couple things that you're not willing to do, that are off the list, like dancing or something, I don't know, country dancing, whatever it is. But even then I would recommend trying it, because you go to your edge with your partner. That is such a beautiful thing to do. So I think that's one thing. The other one is literally going on adventures, like going on hikes, seeing different things you've never done, trying new things like surfing, mountain biking, whatever it is. Kai doesn't want a downhill mountain bike, so that's off the list. But God, would that create a lot? We'll be hooking up after that. For sure.
Yeah. She saw her life flash before her eyes, and
she's like, we better have sex now. But not if she has a broken arm. So that will not, then I will not be having no hand jobs for a long time. And if her parents are listening to this, I apologize. So that, I really think it is about being in the mystery with yourself and being in the mystery with the other. So I think I think from a sexual perspective too, is actually bringing newness to that space, bringing in tantric practices, bringing in practices of exploring each other, really creating a sacred space around that, and the benefit is you get more intimacy, which is
love it.
Holler.
Yeah. Adventure is huge for us. And we have a date. We don't really have a date night. We have what we call Thursday. So every Thursday we actually, out of our work day, because I feel like date night can crush your like personal life buckets where you probably need to rest and restore. So we actually take time off of work, middle of the day, go out and have a coffee date somewhere.
That's nice.
Yeah. So it's, we love adventure. Maybe one last one in the relationship space. What would be an unpopular opinion about, relationship work or relationships that you maintain?
I got two. The first time I ever said this, people were not happy with me, but I said, not every relationship is meant to last forever. I hold that to be true always. And I remember the first time I said that, people were like, oh God, can't listen to this guy. But that's the illusion that they must is actually the problem. Because it actually takes away from the possibility of them actually being fulfilling and doing that. They become sentences rather than choices and intentions, as we've spoken about. The other one that I know has garnered a lot of feedback, we'll call it feedback, on Instagram is whenever I talk about infidelity and I talk about how the person who cheats is not the villain, that there are reasons people cheat. There are obviously like narcissistic psychopaths, and we're not talking about the context of serial psychopathic cheaters. But when the average person does it, it's usually a call to attention to either the relationship or to leave it. And that has been a really unpopular thought. But the reason I say that is because if we can enter it with curiosity as to our role in the relational outcome, then we can at least see, were we afraid to leave? Did we withdraw from the relationship? Was the relationship actually great? Because you hear that, my relationship was great. And then all of a sudden they cheated on me. And you're like, there's probably so much detail to that.
Yeah.
So that's probably another one that's unpopular, but there's a lot of gray to that conversation. So I don't want to say, people who cheat are good people. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is a large percentage that are just human. And that was the best available behavior that they had at the time to get their needs met. And often we cheat to leave relationships too. So because we haven't made leaving relationships something we can choose our way towards, and I'm not giving permission to the behavior in any way.
Right.
But I'm just saying when we can contextualize it, which is hard. I mean, I've been cheated on in an awful way, and not that there's any hierarchy to it, but it was not great. And I do not, it's the exact outcome that happens to someone when they betray themselves far before the betrayal that occurred in the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I betrayed myself.
I think it's often a symptom. It's not the disease itself. It is a symptom of some underlying disease in the relationship or in the person. And I mean, you said it beautifully, that it's like we let's just, for like experiment, approach, the topic with curiosity. And I think that could really serve a lot of people who are navigating that, and to kind of create a roadmap of what to do next. Is like, it's not going to come from shame and blame and guilt.
No.
Any sort of movement or navigation through, I feel like, has to be met with curiosity first and foremost, of why, rather than once a cheater, always a cheater, you're dead to me, bye.
Yeah, even that. I mean, if you're never going to date someone who's cheated before, like, I get it. Someone who's cheated and hasn't looked at their shit is totally different.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are great
ones.
Yeah.
unpopular.
Love those. Yeah. Well,
Perfect.
we could talk to you for 5 more hours. So I hope you have no plans for
Same.
the rest of the night. Yeah, we just so appreciate your wisdom and your vulnerability, and just your realness. Again, coming full circle, you are one of the realest, and it makes you relatable, but also like such an amazing teacher. And I know people are listening to this and they're able to extract nuggets from what you're saying, even though the situation is not going to be the same. That's where great teaching happens, is when you don't have to say, do this, don't do that. You're just gleaning wisdom from someone's lived experience, and you are such a great articulator of the human experience, and another reason why you are such a great teacher. And so obviously, yeah, we've just so enjoyed this, and hopefully in the future we can get you back on for a part 2, because we have so many more questions for you.
Got a million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. We wrap up the show with a few standard questions that every guest from Medicin gets. Medicin is all about nurturing relationships with not just human beings, but with the planet, with your body. Really like mind-body relationships is what we're looking at when it comes to the Medicin. So we'd love to hear from you under the umbrella of mind, body, and relationships. What currently feels like medicine? We'll start with your body. What feels like medicine for your body?
Kettlebell workout.
Nice.
Kettlebells are
No joke.
I love them. I just
Love
love
that.
those workouts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. What about for your mind? What feels like medicine right now?
Mountain biking. Mountain biking is, I'm not by an ocean, so I can't surf, but mountain biking feels like surfing to me, because you have to be in the moment. You have to be present. You can't be thinking about other things, or you're going to eat shit. So
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Love that. And lastly, for relationships or your relationship, what currently feels like medicine?
I think the shared space that we have, it feels like, maybe this will be true a lot, but it feels like we're both in a process of, because we don't live we're living in other people's homes. We're not in our home in Canada for a number of reasons. And I think going through that process together has been really enriching, and also just together holding space for one another's up leveling. I feel like another level is being born from both of us individually, which I know will pay dividends collectively. And so being able to witness her in that process and support her in whatever way I can as I navigate it myself too, and have the same support, has been really, to stay in that space of curiosity really, has been really beautiful.
Yeah. Rolling with the punches of whatever the social crisis is important for relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. These are make or break situations for some people. We were talking about it last night at dinner, where it's like being together 24/7. Chase asked me before we sat down to eat, what are you grateful for? And I just said that I'm with you 24/7 and I never get sick of you. Like we do enjoy our solo individual time for sure on a daily basis, but it's not because I can't stand being around him. It's because I value myself as well. And I'm grateful that this global crisis has only brought us closer, because I know that that's not the case for a lot of people.
No, it isn't. It's brought up things they could avoid by not being at home.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Beautiful thing when you look at it as the gift of the unattended to, but I don't think it's unattended to for a reason. So it's quite as a gift.
Oh, no man. Doubt. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people get more of you. I know they're going to want more for sure.
Well, first off, thanks for trusting me with your audience and your platform.
Mm.
That means a lot to me. I have so much gratitude.
Mm.
You can find me at Create the Love on Instagram. I also have one called It's Smart Groves where I talk a little more about the psychological processes and fuckery that's happening in the world.
Ooh.
And at createthelove.com, you can find courses, breakup stuff, healing codependency, dating process, how to date efficiently, effectively, attachment course. I mean, there's lots of options. So go pick your tool.
Yeah, love it. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Mark. This has been an absolute blast. So appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, you
Appreciate you
guys,
both.
go. Thank you so much. Go check out Mark's stuff. And we are so grateful for you joining us today and listening and extracting the jewels and gems from what was said here. And just take one thing into your life. Don't try to embody it all at once. Just take one little nugget, one little jewel into your life and truly marinate on it. Let it cook you, as Mark said so beautifully. All right, we'll talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.